Guys, we're at a sort of an intermittent series where once a month we do a study on this thing called time. It's a broad subject, that we understand that. But this time thing that we're talking about is what we've been doing is talking about this in the context of a human's life, where we're looking at the human's life in the idea that there are decades that exist in a human's life. Each one of these boxes, remember we said, signifies a different decade. And you know that the decade changes because the question aligned to that decade changes with it. For instance, remember we said that the age between 1 to 10 is a question where every kid is asking, do you like me? Do you like me? Not that you love me. I'm presuming you love me, but I want to know, will you like me? Will you invest in me? Will you listen to me? Will you be kind to me? Will you embrace me? And every kid out there from the age of 1 to 10 is asking that question, do you like me? Now, we're doing this in an endeavor to create a church that is multi-generational, where their generations, despite their diversity and their differences, will embrace this diversity with an understanding. We've got to understand why we need to do this stuff. So 1 to 10, the question is, do you like me? Then we move from the 11s to the 20s. At this particular age, every teenager out there is asking, who am I? Who am I? This is the creation time of a person's destiny, and their identity more than anything else. But every teenager is asking, who am I? Am I who my teacher says I am? Am I who the church says I am? Am I who my parents say I am? Or am I who Google says I am? Who am I is the big question. But today we're moving on. We will ultimately, in the course of the year, once a month, we're going to come back to this theme. Now today we're moving from the 20s to the 30s. And this is an interesting time because there's two big questions that everybody in this age group is asking. Now, this is a young university graduate who's just come out of university. He's graduated with a degree. And the question here is, what am I going to do with my life? What am I going to do with my life? And who's going to do life with me? So here we have another young lady, this time with a university graduate, and she's looking for somebody to marry, and he's looking for somebody to marry. That's a real work of art. But you know what I'm trying to say. So in this particular decade of the 20s to 30s, the question changes to simply asking, what am I going to do with my life, and who am I going to do life with? Now, for those of you who are in these decades down here, I'm asking for your patience here, but I'm asking you to be able to identify with the time when you were at this age as well. Now, when we look at this, Tiana helped me with this, we found some interesting statistics about ages across the world. And this is what the statistics tell us, that this Gen Z generation is the generation that was born from 1997 through to 2012. They're the ones who are the 20s to 30s nowadays. And they call them the Gen Z generation. And these are the guys who 70% of the workforce of the world today is made up of Gen Z people. As people are asked to retire earlier, it's creating more for what they're wanting to hope will be an opportunity for the younger generation to acquire employment. Some places, maybe it's working in South Africa, it's not doing that well. But the same dilemma exists here. 70% of the workforce are actually between that age, they're Gen Zs. But in South Africa, we have an interesting term that they call the born frees. Now, the born frees are the kids that were born from 1994, after the apartheid time died, and the kids from there on were born. They never experienced apartheid. They never went through the stuff that the other generations have been through. And these are the born frees. And here's an interesting statistic. 46 to 50% of the present population were born in that period of time. That's incredible. That half of the South African population have been born frees, born between the time of 1994 to the present day. Now that's interesting. But it's just a statistic. And standing alone, a statistic is of no use to anybody. It's just a bunch of words. But if this is true, I have a little worry. I know that God sustains His church down through the ages. I take nothing away from that. But the church obviously has to sit up and take notice of some of the things that are happening around us. And I'm so frightened that the church is going to lose its relevance from the old people or the guys who were in the Gen Z generation, the millennials and the pre-millennial guys, all those, are dominating church life right now, saying this is how we've done it and this is how we will continue to do it. And the Gen Zs are saying, but hey, that's not relevant to us anymore. And so as a church, we're faced with this incredible challenge of trying to create an environment where the Gen Zs feel that they are valuable and that they are enabled and they are part of the body of the church. You can be a part of the body of Christ and still not find a place in the body of the church. I guess in real terms, the church, older folk, leaders in the church may need to adapt their thinking a little bit. But this is a generation where parents are not so much the source of the Gen Z's information. Now it's Google. If they want information, they don't have to go to mom and dad anymore, or the pastor or the teachers. They go to Google. And it's told that there was something, the statistic we read said that 10,000 opportunities or options of information pass through their cell phones into their eyes every day on average. 10,000. Yeah, that's a lot of info coming into the eyes and into the minds of the Gen Z generation every single day. Now, when we were back at school, they always hear us say that, if we had 100 facts a day come through our minds, that was a lot. Now it's 10,000. And the sad thing is that most of the facts that are coming to them are not nice. On that little device that they have, that they're glued to, that we talk about, and you guys are not just a Gen Z challenge, it's a challenge with Facebook and with all these other things and with YouTube and all of these things. There's violence there. The news is broadcast. Tragedy here, floods there, violence here, wars there, abuse here. And these kids are watching this stuff. Psychologists have been sharing with us and telling us, Athena would I'm sure agree with us, is that this generation are the most anxious generation that there have ever been. All this information has been compounding in their mind and is evidencing itself through anxiety and through all these horrible things that sometimes happen. Nervous anxiety, right down to fear. The suicide rate amongst this generation is higher than it has ever been before, and all this information has created, in many ways, there's good stuff on it, I'm sure, but it's created a sense of real hopelessness. And it's into this world that the church has to adapt to keep its voice alive. If we don't adapt, people, you do know what could happen, hey? We're going to die. And we're going to be like many of those beautiful big cathedrals that we see around the world that are wonderful, but they're now tourist venues. You go in there and you have a cup of coffee and they tell you how things used to be. Now there's nobody going to church, or there's a handful of people attending. Because over the course of the years, the church has lost, sadly, its relevance to the world at that particular time. So the temptation comes to those of us who are older. You have a choice of two things. We can become guard dogs, where we're guarding the old regime. We're guarding the old way of doing things. We're yapping, we're growling, we're grumpy with the new generation coming through, and we can stay that way and die. Or we can become like guide dogs. Because in the midst of all the good that social media can do, there's an awful lot of bad that it has done. And if we were just to be able to say to our young people in this Gen Z generation, we are here to guide you. We're not here to chirp at you or make you feel guilty or lay shame on you. We're here, we want to be here that you can use us as better than guard dogs, guide dogs. So we older generation, I do believe, have to adapt to this creative, innovative, outcomes-based youth generation coming through the ranks. Now, I have to say that, let me qualify that. There's a few things that I read yesterday about the Gen Z generation, is that, our generation, those who are older, sort of my age and maybe a little bit younger than me, We grew up in the timeless principle time, where we had principles that we would hold on to. We had principles that we worked towards. We had principles that some of us would die for those principles because they were ingrained in us through the generations who came out of the war. And they were people who didn't want to waste a lot of money. And all of a sudden, we who are in that timeless principle thing where we're faithful to our jobs, we go to work even though we don't want to go to work. We go to work when we're sick. We go to work. We buy into the principles of courage. It takes a lot of courage to hold on to some of those principles. But now we enter into a generational time that is not so much a generation that is timeless, but it certainly is timely, where all this new information is just doing a job on us, good and bad. The born free, Generation Z people are full of information. They are some of the most creative and innovative people the world has ever seen. They're outcomes based in their work environment. They don't just do a job and stick at the job they'll move jobs for something very easy. And it's an incredible thing. Some of them have more than one job. And they prefer to work from coffee shops and from home. And they'll do this for a couple of hours, then they'll go and drink coffee, then they'll watch TV, and they work through to 1 o'clock in the morning. They're different, man. I want to be in bed at 8 o'clock, people. Not them. 8 o'clock is wake-up time. And on go the phones, and they start to become creative. I remember once leading a group of people down the Zambezi River up in Zimbabwe. And we were on a 10-day canoe trip down the thing, and in my boat, there was a young man from America. He was 24 years old. And we were paddling down amidst all the hippos and the crocodiles and the nature there. And I turned around behind me thinking that he's paddling away, and he's sitting on his computer. In the middle of the Zambezi River is this young man, 24-year-old, watching his computer. So I looked at him and say, hey, what are you doing? And he says to me, no, I'm working. I said, yeah, in the middle of the Zambezi. He said, yeah, it's easy. I can do it all on this computer thing. And he kind of connected with some satellite thing that I don't understand. And he was doing work. What it turned out to be, that this guy was a young man who was passionate about next generation software in the computer world. And I said to him, well, what do you do for a living? He says, no, I invent new software programs. I said, oh, does it pay well? He says, it pays brilliantly. He says, I'm 24 years old. I own 2 houses and an airplane already. And I'm thinking, yo, some people who work hard in the corporate world will work forever, faithfully, day after day, and never get half of what these kids could earn in a year. I said, well, where do you work from? Oh, no. Me and my buddies, we just go sit in the coffee shop, and we dream, and we talk about what if technology could do this. And we're part of that generation that's just dreamers. We're dreaming about what next generation software could look like. This kid is doing it from the middle of the Zambezi River, in the middle of nowhere, and he's dreaming up the next generation of software. Now, I said to him, well, what project are you working on at the moment? He says, no, we're working on a project where we're putting something into people's cell phones that if they are driving and they're driving over a certain speed, the cell phone will automatically cut off. And I'm thinking, that's incredible. Where do you get that idea from? He said, we sit around in coffee shops. I meet with my buddies. I said, how long can you do this for? He said, not long. He says, they've already told me that I'm 24 years old and I'm too old to do this now. I need to, at 24, stand aside for the 18, 19, 20-year-olds who are coming through the ranks. More creative, more ingenious. But that's amazing. That's the generation that we're talking about. Apparently, Gen Z young people are excellent savers, probably because the statistic says that they stay at home till they're 30. Yeah, Mom and Dad, you've been ripped off, yeah? You've been ripped off. And they have more money at 20 years old than you will have at 40 years old, because they're brilliant savers. They accumulate money, more money than you will believe. Now, the challenge for us as a church, we can either become prickly like hedgehogs and roll up and say, don't touch me, we're not going to change, and we just get grumpy and roll up, or we can become like them, where we become like Clem Santa talks about hedgehogs and foxes. Foxes are alert. Foxes are looking for opportunity. Foxes are looking for gaps. And that's the generation that we're dealing with right now. So, how does the church respond? Simply, we said adapt or die. Now, into all of this world that I've just described to you, we still have this word we call careers, where people have to choose a line of work, as diverse as that may be in light of what I've just said. I remember as a kid, my choice of careers was not very broad. We could either be a policeman, a teacher, or a farmer. That was it. Not a lot of diversity in that little lot. But now you can specialize in anything. You can specialize in specializing in something. It's the craziest world. And you can get degrees and doctorates in the craziest things nowadays, studying little amoebas. You can get a full-on triple doctorate in amoebas. Like, for goodness sake. That's how it is, right? The diversity of opportunity is absolutely huge. Now, amidst all of this information and technology, there's still the opportunity to choose a career. The sad thing is, many young people are choosing the wrong career. Now, I know this because some years back, I heard a statistic, another one, that came out of Natal University that said this, that 70% at least of young people this generation who leave university believing they were studying for their careers, within 1 year of leaving university, 60 to 70% of them were not using the degree that they'd spent 4 years at a couple of $100,000 of dad's money, getting. And I thought, is that true? So I phoned the registrar at the university. I said, listen, I've heard this statistic. Is this true? And the lady said, yeah, it is true. I said, that's incredible. Why do you think this is? And she simply said, these kids are making wrong career choices. So I said, if that is true, what do you suggest we do? And she was advocating strongly a gap year. And she was saying, but not just a gap year of time off and holidays and surfing in Hawaii, a gap year with a purpose, a gap year where there's experience and different opportunities in workplaces and in broaden your horizon of what life is all about. And it was because of that statistic primarily that we started what we called back then the Becomers, which is now what we call the Latitude program, where we invite young people to leave school, come to us for a year, and it's a life experience year. It's a year of life shaping your life, your worldview of what life is all about. And I got to tell you, people, I think it's working, man. I think it's working. If every kid could just use that year. Some kids went to the army, some kids went. But this is a great opportunity, and our church has risen to this challenge. Wouldn't it be great if we had 100 kids studying like this instead of just 12, as great as those 12 are? Now, whatever you choose, you will have to make a career. Now, a career, let me define it as this. A career is what you do to make money. But there is a counter to a career, and it's called a calling. You do know that there's a calling on every believer today. And I'm not talking just about a calling that I feel called into a ministry, or I feel called to go to as a missionary to China. That's one aspect of it. But this calling is so important. A calling is something that you do to make a difference. A career is something you do to make money. What are you kids going to do to make a difference today? Your career is one thing, and you've got to pursue it because you've got to eat. You've got to participate. You've got to add your knowledge and experience to the world around you. But that's just your career. What about your calling? You see, we sometimes confuse calling with this missionary call to out of China or out of Mongolia thing. Whereas there's two types of callings. The one type of calling is the general one, where Jesus said, come and follow me. He calls you to follow him. And then you read through the scriptures, the New Testament in particular, and you find that God doesn't just want to call me to follow. He wants me to imitate him. He wants me to be like him. He wants me to be him to the world around me. That's another calling which is universal to absolutely everybody. But there are specific callings for specific times and dates, where God, according to Scripture, and you see the examples of God calling someone which is very specific at a certain time for a particular purpose. Jonah, I want you to go to Nineveh and preach the gospel. He was called for a specific time and a specific purpose. Peter, I want you to leave your nets and come and follow me. Peter had a career as a fisherman, but he has a calling to be a fisher of men. And the calling must never be sacrificed at the altar of your career. Now, you young people, listen carefully what I'm saying here. There will come a temptation when you're going to think your career is all that there is. Do not be fooled. Satan would want you to believe that. A calling is what you do to make a difference, and it's bigger than your career. If you can use your career to fulfill your calling, which is something we should all be contemplating and doing, that would be great. So at certain times, God will call you for certain reasons. The next big choice is, who will do life with me? Who will I choose to be my wife or my husband? For male and female, that's what it's all about. A wife, girl chooses a husband, a young man chooses a young lady, and they get married. Now, let me give you some kids' wisdom here. You're going to love this. I laughed for a long time over this stuff. How to decide who to marry is a big deal. This is what Alan, age 10, says. You've got to find somebody who likes the same stuff. Like if you like sports, she should like that too, like sports. And she should keep the chips and dips coming. Krista, age 10, asked the same question. No person really decides before they grow up who they're going to marry. God decides it all the way before. And you get to find out later who you're stuck with. Camille, age 10, says this. What is the right age to get married? 23 is the best age because you know the person forever by then. How can a stranger tell if two people are married? You may have to guess based on whether they seem to be yelling at the same kids. What do you think your mom and dad have in common? Both of them don't want any more kids. What about this one? When is it okay to kiss somebody? When they're rich. That's what Pam said. I thought this was, let me give you one more. What do most people do on dates? Dates are for having fun, and people use them to get to know each other. But even boys have something to say if you listen long enough. So some great ideas from the kids on marriage. Now, in my time at the church here, nearly 30 years, I've done, I think, over 600 weddings. There's probably a lot of you here that I was blessed to be able to facilitate your wedding ceremony. And I've stopped choosing verses because there are cliche verses that we sometimes use at weddings. We love Ecclesiastes, where it says that 2 is better than 1, and then 3 is better than 2. It's a great verse, and I use it. We read verses like, husbands, love your wives, wives, respect your husband. But the perennial and the most common one that I've ever been given, because they get to choose their verse for me to preach on, is 1 Corinthians 13, and the greatest of these is what? Is love. The problem with love is it's perceived to be, something that it's actually not. It's the most badly used word in the English language. Love is just too romantic. Now, anybody who's been married for any period of time will understand that marriage is not always romantic. The trouble with people is they think that when romance dies, my marriage has died. That could or could not be true. You see, when romance dies, there should be something more to take over that. You know what is greater than marriage and than romance is friendship. And out of romance should grow friendship. Friends are more committed. They're committed to the same ideals, goals, vision. They have become friends because they have a common purpose in mind. Marriage is just so romantic, and romance comes and goes over the course of life. We want to keep it alive as long as we possibly can, obviously, but it's a very misunderstood word. That's why the Greeks have those 3 words that we talk about often. They talk about eros, which is the erotic kind of marriage, love. That's the romantic type. Then we have this philos word, which is the love that exists between friends, common goals, common purpose. And then we have the agape kind of love, which is the unconditional one. But my latest favorite verse is this. And I have asked people whenever I marry them now, I say, please give me a verse so that I don't preach the same stuff at every wedding. Give me a verse that you will dedicate to your marriage, and give that to me, and I will make up a little sermon thought around that. But recently, I was given the verse that comes in Ruth, the book of Ruth, chapter 1, verse 15 and 16, and it reads like this. It's a beautiful verse. It'll come up on the screen right now. Where you go, this is Ruth talking to her mother-in-law, but it could so easily be transferred into a husband and a wife talking to one another. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. You see, there's something better in marriage than just a casual relationship. Starts casual, becomes competitive because you compete for the one you want to love. And then it becomes crazy because courtship is a crazy time where you become what you're not so that the person will like you. But when you're married, you become who you really are. And then they wake up in the morning and say, who the heck are you? I don't know you. Of course, you've been conned during your courtship years. It's a crazy time. And then we get into the committed side where we stand before God and before men and we say, for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and health, to love and to cherish till death parts us. And we say that with such purpose and with tears in our eyes, and we state this as a statement of good intention. But I have to tell you, people, good intention is just not good enough to sustain a marriage union. And those of you who have been married for any time will know this. Compatibility is vitally important at this particular stage. This verse that Ruth gives us 5 definitions of compatibility, and I'm going to rush through these things. The first one, where you go, I will go. That's a commitment to moving in the same direction. Because like if you were tied together, like oxen are harnessed together, and we warned in the scriptures about being unequally yoked, because if you're unequally yoked, the dominant one will pull in a particular direction, and the other one will just tag behind. That's so sad when we see it in marriages, where we read about those who are going in a common direction as those who know where they're going, and they're going to the same place. They're led by the same God who leads them to where He wants them to go. We read about where you go, I will go as a common direction. And I remember at Helene and my wedding, where the pastor who married us, a beautiful man, he said, marriage is like a cup of tea. And I thought, oh, you mean it's easy? It's sipping tea is casual. No, he didn't say that. He says a cup of tea is where you put milk and tea and sugar in, and once they're in there, they're inseparable. He says, but sadly, a lot of marriages are like oil and water. You can put them together, shake that thing up, and then all of a sudden, it looks like you've got something, but you put it on the table, come back 2 minutes later, and what's happened? It's separated, oil and water. A cup of tea is, the units or the makeup of tea is totally inseparable because it's going in the same direction. Tony Campolo, he said this when he talked very wisely on the subject of marriage and this aspect. He says this, he says, 2 people get to marry, and the one says, I want to walk alone, and the other one says, I want to walk alone, and they get married, and they walk alone together. And you're saying, that's not possible. It's just not logical. I see it all the time, don't you? He has his dreams, his goals, his vision. She has hers, and never the twain meets. That's what causes marriages to fall apart. They've got to be going in the same direction, equally yoked together. The second statement of compatibility is, where you stay, I will stay. I want to talk this about in the context of home. We all have houses, and every couple has a dream house. They want to live in a house like this, or in this area, or it looks like this. But a house is a house. It's made of brick and mortar. But a home is a place where I stay. It's a place where I feel comfortable. It's a place where I feel valued. It's a place where I feel safe. And it's a place where I feel forgiven. You see, forgiveness, building a house is easy, but forgiveness is what bonds people together. It's the bricks that make a home. Learning to forgive one another and living with an attitude of forgiveness is what holds a house into a home, and nothing can break that thing if forgiveness can be what it's meant to be. Now, we have token forgiveness where we will say the words, oh, I forgive you. But really, only you will know whether it's true or not. But you will know a house from a home by the wonder of forgiveness. Can I feel forgiven? Am I given a second chance? Is failure not fatal? Is failure not final? When you find a place like that and your house turns into a home, that will be what holds you together. Where you stay, I will stay. Third one, your people will be my people. Talking about extended family. You see, there's a circle here that says, this is me and you, the two of us together. But there's another circle around it, which is a circle of extended family. This is where you never get married in isolation. And if you live in isolation as a married couple, it could be a very miserable place to live. We have extended families. We have aunts, we have uncles, we have grandparents. We have those that are around us who you can't marry. You can't choose your family. You marry into that and you're stuck with that. So make the most of that. Your extended family, they're going to be the ones that will be standing with you at your funeral. A lot of the people that we spend time trying to impress, they're not going to be at your funeral, but you know who will be there? Is your family. So we need to grow a greater value of our families. Then we talk about this wonder of community is a third level, and that's the community of the church. Community of the church. You have another family. Those of you who are married and decide you don't need the church family anymore, that's not cool. You're not going to last. The fellowship and the camaraderie and the counseling and the accountability that comes from being a part of this body. You young people, when you get married, do not walk away from the church. They need you as much as you need them. Be a part of this, bond with them, and make your marriage count for something more than just a nice, sweet little romantic union. Take your influence into the greater one, which is the influence into community. So you've got the two of you, you've got your family, you've got the church, and then you've got your community. And every marriage should stand for something more than just him and me or her and me. It shouldn't be like that. It should be something where you adding value to a community in a world that is dying and going to hell. You young couples have a strong voice in that. Number 4, your God will be my God. That's the height of compatibility. If you get those others not quite right, and if you get this one right, you're going to probably be fine. Now, we define this by that triangle thing. Remember we did a while back, where your life is like a triangle. Along the baseline, you arrange everything that you love and is important to you. As you journey towards the top of the triangle, the baseline gets shorter and shorter, remember? And you've got to get rid of stuff in order before you get to the top. When you get to the top, there's room for only one thing. And the question we ask is, what is that one thing? If you could find, young people, somebody who shares the same one thing as you, you've found compatibility. Compatibility is not determined by how many things you agree on. It's determined by the big one. Now, I didn't say this. Time magazine did an article on what keeps marriages together. They did a comparison between love and computer dating. And they, over the course of years, studied marriages that had fallen apart or marriages that had lasted. And they found that computer dating beat love hands down, because compatibility was what it was all about. Now, compatibility, as I said, is not by how many things you agree on, but the question is, who's at the top of your triangle? When God, for us as believers, is at the top of both triangles, and you marry somebody like that, you have a depth of compatibility that will weather many, many storms. If yours is God and you girls, if his is money, and you get married, don't forecast too much happiness in that home. You got to have the same big one. This is the big one. That's why we said just now, don't be unequally yoked. Marry people who love God, if that's how you love God. Now, the last one, where you die, I will die. This is like the exclamation mark at the end of the sentence. This speaks of permanence. This speaks of good intentions not being good enough. If I'm going to sustain this, I've got to be able to be there for the long haul. Too many people get married today and say, we'll just give it a try. Let's see how it goes. If it doesn't work there, we could just get divorced, or we could separate or something like that. Good intentions, people, are not good enough to create a marriage union that will glorify God and be a blessing to you and others. Let me conclude by saying this. Some time back, I used to go down to St. Michael's Beach with my car early in the morning, and I would prepare my sermon for Sunday sitting in the car. And it would be 5:30 in the morning. I'd be there. The sun would be rising. I'd have my Bible, and I would prepare the sermon that I would preach to you guys on Sunday, on a Saturday morning very early. When you get to the beach, there's nobody there. But on this particular day, I got to the beach, and I'm sitting there doing my thing, looking out to sea, when I saw a car pull up, and out of this car got two very old people. And they held each other's hands. They walked across the road. And they came and they sat down on a bench in front of me, right in front of my car. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. And I opened the window of the car, and I thought, I wonder what 80, 90-year-old people say to each other at 5:30 in the morning. So I thought I'd just listen in on the conversation. And while I was listening in, I noticed that not one word was said. For an hour, they sat there, and they just stared at the sea, holding hands. And they sat there. Well, when you've been married for 60 years, I guess there's nothing left to be said. We've said it all. But there they sat, and I thought this was the greatest lesson of communication I've ever seen, where they communicate without the use of words. They were just bonded together. The sense of unity between these two little old people was mind-blowing. And then my mind began to go to them. I wonder how many problems these people have had in their lives. I wonder how many issues they've had over the course of time. I wonder how many bereavements they've had in their family. I wonder if their businesses have ever been bankrupt. I wondered how many tragedies and traumas that this marriage had been through over the course of probably 60 years. I wondered all about those things. And yet there they were, still together. And I thought, man, swimming's held those people together. I bet they were good forgivers. I bet they'll build homes, not houses. I bet they went in a common direction, and when they found they were going off, they would come back again. If you want to build a home, kids, young people, Gen Zs, and I hope that you find a great career. Never forsake your calling for your career. Career is what you do to make money. Your calling is what you do to make a difference, and that's a big deal thing. You take that to eternity with you. And then when you're looking for a partner, a wife or a husband, then make sure you find the big one, and I guess you're going to be fine. Let's pray. Father, my heart goes out today to those who have listened to what I've had to say, and sadly, what I've spoken about has not been their experience. There are amongst us those who have been through the tragedy and the trauma of divorce, and our hearts go out to them today. But thank you that even when things sometimes go wrong, as they sometimes do, that there's life. There's life after divorce. Lord, I pray that you would show hope to them, that this life could continue, and they could continue to be a blessing to one another and to others. Thank you for courses like Divorce Recovery that Mike and Irene run. Pray, God, that there would be people who would be courageous enough who need this to join that great course and find out how to recover after the trauma of divorce. And Lord, for those who are still single after 30, whatever, this is just a guideline. It's not a set and concrete thing, this 30 thing. But Lord, I pray that those who are single amongst us would, during this time, embrace their singleness. There's so much that they can do, so much time, extra time they have on their hands and energy that they can invest. I pray that they would embrace that time and then relax in the knowledge that all things are made beautiful in your time. Help our Gen Z kids to focus on those things that really matter at the end of the day. We love them and pray that we as a church will be indeed relevant to them in these days. We ask it in your name. Amen.